Okay. We should be live. Welcome
Perfect.
to the next edition of Theory for Theory. All right. My guest today is Aleczandxr, whose series hashtag AJ Piece has been a really fun part of the community for, would you say it's been 2 years, a year and a half? When did you
It's
start the
been it's been about 2.5 years. I started early 2022, so March-ish 2022.
Love that. So, for those who don't know, AJ here falls into the category of, I would say, creators who weren't primarily doing One Piece content that started sharing their journey catching up to One Piece, uh, you know, with everybody in the community. So, this is like your, Totally Not Mark, Murphy Napier, Daniel Green, now the Drock show. AJ falls into that. He recently caught up to the series, very recently, and we're here to sort of get into everything. Now, AJ said that he doesn't consider himself much of a theorist, so today is really analysis for analysis, and just some sort of friendly sparring. If you're not familiar with the way that I run things here, which I wouldn't imagine you would be since you just caught up.
Mhm.
We're, this is basically just freestyle conversations about the series. We'll get into our general thoughts. We'll certainly tackle recent events, but one thing that I would love today is, we can really like maybe even just dive into character in and I think we can kind of hit the for the niche on the the fans that are in the chat that want to hear theories. I think that those can naturally come as we're talking about character, because if we get into certain characters, we can discuss where we would like to see the character go, or what elements of their journey are still missing for the story, and that constitutes as a theory. So to one thing that and I've watched many of your videos. I haven't seen the entire journey, but I've seen a lot of your pre-time skip stuff and some of the post-time skip stuff, and I think that your analysis of the series is probably some of the best that I've seen, and I enjoyed it. And one thing that you do at the end of each of your videos is a character ranking, and so I've heard your character rankings, and I figured so that you know a little bit more about me and where my head is at in terms of the story, I'm going to give you a top 20 characters, so that
Perfect.
this way we can kind of like bounce off of that, and if there's anything there that strikes you, we can kind of like start the conversation from there.
Sounds good.
So I did like a quick and dirty list before we started here. Anything that I'm saying here could change tomorrow. It could change 2 hours from now. But as of 10:39 a.m. on the West Coast on September 1st, 2024, my favorite characters list is 20 Calgara, 19 Zoro, 18 Robin, 17 Pedro, 16 Wiper, 15 Gin, 14 Iceberg, 13 Marco, 12 Big News Morgans, 11 Kuzan, 10 Smoker, 9 Mr. 3, 8 Franky, 7 Dr. Hiralook, 6 Kiros, 5 Kuma, 4 Bellamy the Hyena, 3 Sanji, 2 Crocodile, and number 1 Vivi.
Wow. I that's so cool because it is so different from mine. It's so entirely different from mine. I have a bunch of things I'm curious about and like would be interested in. Um, First of all, thank you for the compliment about the videos. That really means a lot, and I'm really glad you enjoyed them. Um, but uh, a glaring there are like three or four things that stuck out to me that are really cool, and the glaring thing was no Luffy. So generally I'm generally curious about. I mean, you're a huge One Piece fan. I'm sure you think he's really good, or maybe not. I don't know, but I'm just generally curious about why he's not doesn't quite make your top 20.
I love Luffy. Don't get me
Mm.
wrong. But my the way that I kind of take in media or series in general, I never gravitate to the main character. It's and I always kind of, it might be silly to say, but they're almost in their kind of own category because it's like we're following their story, and they're always going to get the most focus to begin with. So it almost feels like I'm wasting a slot giving it to Luffy
Oh, okay.
because it's his story. Like, but then again, I didn't watch Dragon Ball growing up for Goku. I watched it for, sadly, for Yamcha, Tien, and Krillin. But the, it's like, but you're still invested in the character's journey. Yeah, I mean, I could probably take any shonen series, and I don't know if the protagonist would be on my list. I know that you are known in the community for your Hunter x Hunter categories. I wouldn't have gone on my top 20 either.
Mhm.
But Leorio would be my number one, and Kurapika would be in my top three. And that's, I guess that's just where I feel about it. It's not any shade to Luffy. I think Luffy probably is my favorite protagonist. I mean, I think that's kind of probably obvious, since I cover One Piece. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting observation. That's how I feel about it.
That's really cool. That's really interesting, and no, that totally makes sense as well. I just had to ask since I was totally waiting for it, and I'm like, oh, and it's really cool because again, I'm super protagonist centric, and a lot of my favorite stories, the protagonist is top three, top five most of the time. So that's just really interesting to me and really cool. A second thing that stuck out to me was Smoker was 10, I believe.
Let me see here. Yeah, I had Smoker at 10. Yeah, he is definitely my favorite Marine, and he is the Marine that I feel started the series with the most potential, and I'm hoping that by the end of the series that potential gets realized. He started this trope, to kind of analyze the story where he was our first vehicle for corruption in the government. So he
Right.
was, he was our eyes into that, which sort of opened our world to everything else that followed. So Oda naturally built this character up in a way that has yet to be realized, which is Smoker doing a heel turn. Like in any sort of story, he is the character that would be generally set up to do. You're fully caught up, right? To the
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So to the level of what we just recently saw with Kizaru, that is what I've always, and even further, what I've always wanted from Smoker. I am waiting for the moment where he really just tenders his resignation completely.
Yeah.
Like in the same way that he told all of the, the higher ups to eat it because they wanted to give him the promotion at the end of Alabasta. I think that if Oda had stayed true to his idea of One Piece being much, much shorter than it ever was. I don't know if we would have had characters like Fujitora, Kuzan as fleshed out as he is, or even Kizaru. Because I think all of those storylines would have been given to Smoker, as he was already kind of on that path and that trajectory. So, whereas we have this kind of character model that is now split between all of the 4 characters I just mentioned, Fujitora, Kuzan, Kizaru, and Smoker. They're all kind of the same archetype of government bad, and I'm going to go against my organization at some point. I really hope Oda dials in and focuses back on Smoker being the main focus of that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Smoker was he's still one of the characters I'm most invested in, and like when we talk about characters that you really want to I guess blossom or really get their moments going forward, he's top of the list because of all that. I think he's an interesting challenge because like you say, a lot of the characters that we've had introduced have kind of taken his taken some of the directions his character could have gone in. Like you said, Fujitora. I think some elements of Garp, Kizaru, and Akainu and Kuzan. And we have such. One of the things I've been really impressed with lately is how Oda's been approaching the characterization of Kizaru and Akainu, and how you have such. You have the broad spectrum, the broad strokes of who they are, which is once you get into the grays and the nuance, the reluctant Marine. But with Kizaru, we have this really interesting, sort of heartbreaking on his end, resignation and pain that he has to do these things. And he's essentially just gone like, this is the way of the world and this is something I have to do, and he hates it, but he does it anyway. Whereas Akainu is sort of chained and seems desperate to almost seemingly defy fate, which is, can I change this from my position right now? And they just approach it so differently. And so I really hope that Smoker continues to get it's I think a huge challenge to make him different from those sorts of things, because each of those characters are all amazing and they all cover such interesting ground. But I think one of the biggest expectations and things I hope for in the story is for Smoker to have his payoff that was, I think, set up magnificently in Alabasta, and sort of hinted at afterwards, but not really focused on a ton. And for it to be distinct, because I don't think it's easy to do that. Because we've got like 5 or 6 primary characters in that sort of mold. So I'm really anticipating that.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% on that. My position with Akainu, Sakazuki, and even Kizaru to a degree, is that I have never really wanted Oda to put as much focus as he is, or the type of focus that he's putting onto those particular characters, because I love when we have a story that is trying to flesh out the characters and make things morally gray, which is something that Oda is excellent at. He's always sort of dancing between that line, showing both sides of everything and letting the viewer sort of kind of hang in the balance of what's right, what's wrong, and our protagonists don't even care about that kind of stuff. Luffy is outspoken, not a hero, so he's not leaning good, he's not leaning bad, so we're able to sort of explore the gray. And the thing is with a character like Akainu, he is somebody that I don't want to explore the gray of. I think that Oda will, but as we start getting into the final saga and we're getting to this end game here, I want more irredeemable villains. This is someone that killed Ace. I don't want to be fighting alongside Sakazuki against Imu or something in a final battle. That's not any sort of theory that I have or anything. That's just sort of just hyperbole that I'm throwing out. I don't want to feel sorry for him. I don't want to get like a sad Sakazuki backstory. This is a guy that blew up a ship in Ohara. He is a bad dude. And whether he is, following orders or not, I hope that he remains that. And I'm, with the way that Oda has treated Kizaru, which I have to say has been expertly done, even though I also would have preferred Kizaru to be like, sort of irredeemable. I'm very happy with the way that the story has gone with this. Almost an inverse of what we got in the Archipelago, where Kizaru came in and had our heroes, basically at their lowest point. Our heroes have now brought Kizaru to his lowest point. So, we have that fun way to go about things, and that's what makes it worth it for me, like Oda taking the time to develop Kizaru in this way. I would just have to see how he goes about it with Akainu to see if he changes my mind.
Cool. Yeah, I'm with you on. I'm really really enjoying the focus on the on them. So, but I'm definitely with you with the idea that I don't want to be, like you said, I don't want to be fighting alongside them. I think it's cool to give us these layers and these depths and to bounce them off of one another, to explore them and see the different psychologies at play here, because that's really worthwhile and really important. But I do definitely think there's a line that shouldn't be crossed with regards to the empathy approach with them.
Yes.
Because of where they came from, like you said. So I really hope it stays on that side of the line, and I think it will, but I guess we'll see. There was another one that stuck out to me, which was, I think, was Franky your highest Straw Hat? I think he might have been.
Technically, Vivi is my highest Straw
Hat. Oh, Vivi, right.
But then it's Sanji's in my top 5, and then Franky is in my top 10.
Okay. So I'm really curious about that, because I really like Franky, but I've been a little, through my streams, I've been joking around with, clowning on him a little bit, just because people push back on the idea that he's actually my least favorite. So I'm just really interested to see why he's sort of near the top of the list for you.
Well, I think superficially, if you look over my right shoulder here, I have this Terminator bust, which is my favorite film series. So I am drawn to robotic characters, and anything that seems remotely Arnold Schwarzenegger related. So and Oda is also an outspoken Terminator fan, and the references to the story are, just all over the place. Smoker being the first example of someone that was based off of Arnold Schwarzenegger, Kuma following in that, and then Franky being another cross between Jim Carrey and Arnold Schwarzenegger. So it's just Oda blending that pop culture in there, and I don't know. I just it's more of a, for Franky, it's more of a vibe thing than anything. I hope that he gets more development, and in recent years I've sort of felt a little underwhelmed with some of the direction that the character has gone. Hyping up this idea in Wano that he would get a rechargeable laser, but then never really following through in that. And then now that we've finished Egghead, Franky left without any really significant upgrade. Although I do expect now, with Lilith there, and the looming threat of whatever is being foreshadowed with his bounty poster being the Sunny, that something will happen. I had thought maybe Oda would take an opportunity at several points of Egghead. I was wrong, but to destroy Franky's actual, for the most part, his corporeal form, and then he would actually just become more cyborg than man. And that maybe the bounty poster was foreshadowing that he would potentially sync with the Sunny, and then we'd have a mecha Sunny, sort of an upgrade of the Franky Shogun. And I think that Mecha Sunny could still happen, especially with Lilith being there and everything with the Vega Force 1. I think that that's something that Oda probably won't restrain himself from doing. So I think that there's still some great opportunities for that, especially, you know, when you think about we have to fight the Blackbeard Pirates at some point, and they have San Juan Wolf, who is this gigantic character. It might be interesting if that was potentially Franky's battle, and it was this giant mecha Sunny versus this giant man. Although I would prefer to see Franky fight Burgess. I don't know. What are your takeaways and things that you don't like about Franky? Would you prefer he put pants on?
No, he can do his thing. The thing with Franky is more. It's not so much any presence of any negatives. It's just not as many positives as the rest of the Straw Hats for me. Whereas, like, I think it's pretty clear that there's big stylistic differences pre and post time skip. Personally, I like them more or less as much as one another. I love them both. I love the different. I think they're both very contributory to the story Oda wants to tell, and I think they complement one another. But I think a huge thing post time skip has been that the Straw Hats, a lot of their primary stories have been told, and they just take a step back a little bit. They're a little bit more in the background. We don't have, with the exception of like Whole Cake Island for Sanji. Luffy always being prominent, and like moments, we don't have a prominent Nami arc like we did pre-time skip.
Yep.
We don't have a prominent Robin arc, Brook, and it's much more of Oda picking his spots for these characters to shine in. And what I like is there's a big variety because Sanji has his arc, and I think he's beautifully developed in Wano. I think he's as good in Wano as he is in Whole Cake. Whereas someone like I guess a Chopper, I think his moments are sprinkled in little moments, but I think really substantial ones, up to a certain point. And so I think it's a big difference in style. And sorry, I'll just quickly finish off by saying, and I don't have a problem with them being more in the background and it being more sort of piecemeal. But I do still want it, like, we love them. They're our crew. And I do still want them to have substantial stuff. And for me, Franky's been the one with the least amount of, in my opinion, stuff to grasp onto in terms of his journey continuing forward. And it's not that I dislike anything. It's just that I want more for him. And I hope there is more. But that's why, because I think I've been a bit more pleased with every other Straw Hat to varying extents post-time skip.
I completely agree with that. I think that is a very reasonable criticism for Oda, that he has relegated a lot of the Straw Hats to the background and to these sort of just singular moments that you can pull out from each arc. You know, obviously you have Arlong Park so Nami-focused, and never since has she been as focused. Robin during Enies Lobby, never has she been as focused. And one of the criticisms that I've made publicly is that for as good and as cool as Law is and was to the story, he was a detriment to the development of our team, because he is literally every Straw Hat. He's a doctor, so he's taking that away from Chopper. He's a smart, worldly character that is providing exposition, so he's removing that from Robin. He's makes plans and is kind of sneaky, so he was taking things away from Sanji. And he has a sword, which is kind of, downplaying Zoro, and he took the number 2 role in Dressrosa, which he should have, because that was so focused on his role as well. But I mean, continuing that, from overshadowing someone like Zoro in Punk Hazard all the way up through Wano. And I guess Franky might not be it might be the person he didn't overshadow because he wasn't trying to fix the ship.
It's hard to overlap with him.
Right. So it makes Franky maybe even stand out more as somebody who hasn't really, done nearly as much and has been underserved. Now we know that, and it has been hinted that in Franky's past, his parents were pirates that ditched him. It's like, not that we need another someone as famous parents story, but it's like that would be a way to kind of flesh Franky out a little more, where we found out like, oh, these are Franky's parents and this is why they threw him off the ship, and it's like, and it ties into the One Piece, whatever. But another easy way could have been just some private moments between him and Vegapunk having a conversation about his time on Baltimore, and maybe Franky starts asking Vegapunk a question. Hey, I read that that blueprint that you had, and I thought it was kind of missing this. Oh wow, let's talk about this. Oh, we could actually upgrade your lasers. And it's just like simple moments like that could have been done on a page could have really like elevated just Franky's development. And then in the background, we know like, oh, well, Franky has this thing that he hasn't used yet that we're going to take with us into the next arc. So to service, the either the tag along characters or just the protagonist, many of our great characters on the ship have been sidelined. And so yeah, Franky, if I was being realistic about their role in the story rather than just my favorite, yeah, he probably wouldn't be as high as he is, but vibe wise, he passes the check.
Cool. I have those vibey characters that you just, for very personal reasons or likability or just vibes or whatever, you just really like them. Carrot's one for me. I adore Carrot. And when I have her higher than characters that are more complex or deep, it's interesting to see the sort of pushback that I get. She's funny and she's I like her dynamic with Chopper. It's really cute.
Yes.
And that's it. That's all you need.
Carrot's a great character, and especially in Whole Cake. And I have Pedro on my list, and I love Pedro. I love the dynamic that Carrot had with Pedro. But that's another character that was completely underserviced by Oda come Wano. It's like we built up this character, we set them up with our friends, and then I used to say that she got to Wano, and then if it was like tables at a high school, she went and sat with the minks instead of the Straw Hats. So, so it was just like we built all this stuff, and she's like, "Oh, I my friends are over here, guys. It was cool. It was great hanging out with you guys, but I know them." So that was kind of the problem. It would have been nice to have more moments of Carrot like standing tall with our team. I think one of the easy things would have been to have her getting involved in the big battle royale that happened around Yasuie's execution. There were a lot of opportunities for Oda to put Carrot with the Straw Hats, and then actively made the choice to not do it and not focus on the character. And that hinders the way that I feel about the character personally, but I still love their showing in Whole Cake. The Sulong transformation moment is just iconic. And one of my big theories is that it is tied to the Gear 5 form, as well as Hodi's transformation via the pills. Because all of it turns you white and gives you red eyes. And so I feel like there just has to be some sort of connection there. It's possible that the pills were, maybe something in the Void Century trying to replicate the Nika transformation in some way. Moonlight has just reflected sunlight, so there might just be some sort of larger connection here to Nika with the minks and those pills.
That's really cool. It's always so cool to hear these sorts of theories that have been built up, because, like you said, I've had some theories throughout, but they were very few and far between, and ones that I really honed in on. Like I had this running Kanjuro one throughout most of post time skip. I have a couple going forward, or a couple of things that would be very cool, but like they're very few. So it's so cool to hear of these and hear these connections and think about possibilities for the future and stuff like that.
What was the Kanjuro theory? What was that thought?
Oh, that was that there. Well, it started off very broad when he was in. So we heard about him through word of mouth through Punk Hazard, throughout Punk Hazard, and we saw a very quick flashback of, I think Momo talking about him or something, and the way he's illustrated is you just see like half of his silhouette in the foreground, and I wouldn't be able to exactly tell you, but you didn't see his face. You just saw this sort of hulking shape. It was in shadow, and the way it was storyboarded and presented felt very ominous. And I'm just like, this is really weird. Like, this character who we've heard about, who's this really swell guy, is presented very ominously. That's strange. I can't wait to meet him. And we meet him, and he's totally different from that. But then I slowly honed in on him being the traitor, through really, it's really funny. It's through none of the stuff, like nothing logical. It was just like sort of presentation. Like there was a moment where we see in early Wano, I believe, we see the whole crew, the Akazaya 9, and everyone fighting for Wano. And there's a speech bubble, and the speech bubble covers only Kanjuro's face. And I'm just like, what? Why only him? Why is he the one who's obscured here? Why are we not seeing him wanting to fight for this cause? And so, like, I don't know. It was a very fun back and forth with me and the story, and my stream trying to tell me I was coping. That I wasn't.
They were trying to preserve the twist.
They were.
Yeah.
They were. That was the beautiful thing about it. So yeah, that was the big one that's now been put to rest, and I really love how Kanjuro's character was concluded. I love everything about the character. I think he's great.
He is my favorite antagonist from the Wano arc.
Oh yeah, that he's
above Kaido for me.
That's really cool. I think he's probably my second favorite. I really like a lot of the cast that was introduced in Wano, including all the antagonistic characters. But like you said, in some ways, they got the spotlight, whereas a lot of characters that may have been built up were kind of reduced. But yeah, Kanjuro specifically, I adore his conclusion, his sort of role being a lack of an identity, to sort of contrast with the identity that from which a lot of the citizenry of Wano are trying to get back. That sort of common ground there, and then his conclusion, sort of embracing the man that gave him purpose, that gave him this new lease on life, but him being this flame and sort of taking him down with him. I thought it was really poetic. So yeah, Kanjuro was a big theory, and I really adored, from minute one to the end. He's really sort of unorthodox, but I had a really fun relationship with his character, and I really enjoyed him.
Yeah, Kanjuro is one of my favorite running twists post time skip. I caught on to him being the traitor pretty early on myself, and I've been weekly with the series since Skypiea, but when you go back and you look at all of the moments, you know, it's like you see that Oda had that particular thing mapped out from the beginning. He maps out a lot early. Not everything, but that one was. Because you can see right from the start, like, even when we're introduced to Kanjuro, he's super bored, he's lethargic, like, he's not really giving up the energy that everybody else is about the cause ever. And as you start reading Zoe, you see all of the ways that he's subtly, like, presented in a joking manner, subverting and trying to actually hinder the plan. Like knocking Kinemon off of Ryunosuke, and things like that. All of covering people's eyes so that they can't see things. It's all there. It's all there. And then even subtleties of when they arrive in the future, you can actually see where Kanjuro drew one of his like birds to go to Orochi. It's just very small in the panel, so it's good stuff.
Yeah. Going back to the I guess the idea of the Straw Hats and their roles, from what I remember, Robin was in your top 20, right?
Yeah.
How generally do you feel about her specifically, I guess post time skip?
I would say up until we finally got a little bit of development in basically 1 or 2 chapters of Egghead, largely disappointed, and I would probably put it up there with one of the biggest fumbles. But at least we finally got a fight in Wano. Not that everything needs to be punch punch kick kick in shonens, and I'm actually more interested always in the the story rather than the fighting. But for it to take 16 years to in real time for Oda to actually draw Robin standing up against an opponent, when the basis of them joining was almost aside from obviously being the only person in the world outside of now Sukiyaki that could read the poneglyphs, she was a combatant. Her specialty was assassination. And Oda has found so many ways to avoid using her power, and he said it in an SBS that he regrets making Robin as broken as she is because he actually doesn't know how to craft a fight without her ending it in 5 seconds. So that's kind of the detriment to everything there. But the main problem was that here was our character that actually knows about the world. This character that was introduced as being the older person on the crew, the more seasoned veteran that had been in many different blues, that had been in the Grand Line for several years. And suddenly we are replacing her with Law to give us all of the information and not really focusing on her. I did really appreciate her in Dressrosa as well, but even then, I think highlighting Robin's intelligence is, I think, the key to making her, keeping her relevant, because that's her biggest asset to the team. And I would love if Oda took the time to put her in more situations where she had to think her way out of it. For instance, in Dressrosa, when she's up against Gladius, the man with the pop fruit, and the one that Bartolomeo takes out. What I think would have been more interesting, instead of highlighting this new character that was just invented for this arc, and I love Barto, I think it would have been more interesting to see Robin fight Gladius, because here's a character that it would have been, their powers are kind of anachronistic, because here's this guy who can explode anything that that he's touching, and anything, and here Robin would have to figure out a way to kind of not touch this guy, unless he can't actually affect organic material. But it still would have been a something more challenging. And so I think that from going from Fishman Island and all of the setup for the poneglyphs and the lore of Joy Boy, and then not really seeing Robin get to do any sort of archaeological work until we're in the old Wano, with that sort of poneglyph, because she didn't go to Whole Cake where the poneglyphs were. She just got the rubbings afterwards. I think that that's a misstep as well. We should be keeping that story going. Robin is so essential to what I expect the end game of the story to be, that's when we're going to get the focus of the character again. And I think that this is one of those situations where, again, like I talked about earlier with Smoker probably getting more focus if the story was more condensed, I feel like Robin also is one of those characters hurt by the collateral of everything that will be super focused on as we're getting to Laugh Tale, as the poneglyphs become even more essential to the plot. But because we diverted and made all these sort of turns that don't necessarily apply to that, that's why her characters kind of fall into the wayside.
Yeah, I totally get that. It's interesting because I think there are a lot of, I guess, plot-based, lore-based reasons, logistically, for why her getting the backseat as well just doesn't really make sense in terms of her role, because she is absolutely one of the most important characters. And I definitely agree with that, because she was shafted a little bit with regards to her relevance. But it's interesting because, that aside, she's the one character that I've talked about post time skip for which, outside of that, because she does have tons of relevance with regards to the plot and the overall story and the mysteries going forward, I've constantly said that given her arc pre-time skip and into Ennie's lobby and this huge self-affirming, life-affirming moment and opening herself up to her new family after years and years of hardship and trauma and sacrifice and just tragedy, I'd be fine if Robin just vibes the rest of the story, that sort of poneglyph lore stuff aside. I was fine if she just vibed the entire time, because specifically with regards to her, that lack of, I guess, that ability to just sort of sit back and laugh and just be in the background with her sweet smile with the rest of the Straw Hat, the fact that she is able to do that a lot of the time, I think in and of itself is more powerful than it would be for any other Straw Hat, because specifically of where she's come. And a lot of them obviously have gone through immense trauma. But not as I guess long, not as long of a time for Robin, and not specifically to the idea where the whole idea of existence and I don't want to live. Now she's reached the point where she wants to live, she wants these connections and everything, and I just think it's really beautiful to have her just chilling and enjoying this time with the family that she loves, and that would have been fine for me, outside of what you said. However, then we get to Wano, and I think Robin's great in Dressrosa. And yeah, there could have been a really cool fight there where she took more of a support role, which I do think was executed really well, sort of mirroring her experiences with life and her pains, and making it so that Rebecca would not go through something very similar, which I think is really beautiful. So I love her there. And then in Wano, in the scene that, from what I can tell, is pretty volatile and controversial, but where Sanji calls out to her for help. And
I love that scene.
Okay, cool. You're on the right side of history as far as I'm concerned. In seriousness, I love that scene. That's one of my favorite Sanji scenes and one of my favorite Robin scenes. And what's beautiful about it is, given what I expected for her, that was kind of a bonus that she was able to do that. And there's such understanding in her words. Thank you for, I don't know, I'm paraphrasing, but she essentially says, thank you for leaning on me. Thank you for trusting me, Sanji, because she knows how important that is for him, how big of a step it is for him to be able to lean on the rest of the Straw Hats. So I would have been, I don't think it would have been masterful writing if she just vibed the whole time post time skip, but I would have been fine with it outside of the plot stuff because of what she's been through and where she is in her life, and she deserves that sort of thing. But to, in addition, have those sorts of highlights was really great for me. So Robin is one of my favorite Straw Hats post time skip, which is interesting for sort of those reasons. But I do agree that going forward, like it's been kind of logistically messy, and going forward, for the story to make sense, I think she has to have more emphasis. So again, it's just a cool little difference in the way we view it that I find really fun.
Yeah. Let's see. Before we continue, I want to get into some of these member chats, super chats. There's only a few here. DJ BS, member for 38 months, said, great to be here. Positive vibes, y'all. AJ1218, member for 39 months, said, welcome, AJ. 2 AJs.
Thank you.
My guy. Mark Creasy, member for 35 months, said, Smoker having a Kizaru-like moment would have genuinely hit me a lot harder if it happened earlier. Yeah. Brandon King super chatted and said, 2 questions. 1, what was the first thing that cued you in that this series is different? And 2, which characters do you have the highest hopes for in the final saga? So what was the moment as you started reading, if there was a moment, that cued you in that this series is either different or that there's something here?
With regards to it, there being something here, it was right at the beginning. It was chapter 1, which I still think is one of the best first chapters of anything. One of the best starts to a story, episodes, chapters, whatever. Because Shanks really, Shanks and Luffy, but I think Shanks has the core of the first chapter. It really hooks you into the thematics, the messages, and then hooks you into Luffy going forward, carrying forward that torch. I think so. Chapter 1 is where I felt like something was there. In terms of when I sort of got properly hooked, is interesting because I hear a few different common opinions for that. Some say Arlong Park, some say Baratier, some a bit later. But for me, it was actually the conclusion to Syrup Village, where we had this really poetic, thematic apex with regards to Usopp's tall tales and Usopp's lies. And I think there's some really interesting metatextual stuff that Oda does with stories, the ideas of lies and stories and the beauty of that, and Kaya's relationship with him, and his backstory with his mother and Yasop, and all of that sort of coming to a head, and his crew, where we learn properly and contextualize why he is the way he is and what he wants to do going forward. And it all just came together in a way that I found so unbelievably beautiful and poetic and potent, and made me really invested in him, and particularly, obviously him, but particularly Oda going forward, because I'm like, there's something special about the way this has been paid off. I'm not a fan of sort of the midsection of Syrup Village. I think it's pretty narratively thin and not super interesting. But I think the way it all comes together is such a beautiful payoff for the ideas that have been established prior. And I was thinking, if I can get more of this, then yeah, I'm in this for the long haul. This could be really special. And it was, because I've consistently said, I think people say, what are Oda's greatest strengths? World building is a big one that I hear all the time. And I think it's fantastic. But I think my favorite thing that Oda has, my favorite element of Oda from the beginning to now is payoff within arcs and within the full story. And I think Syrup Village is the first sort of example of where I saw how effective it could be. So that would probably be the moment.
I like that. Now, and it's interesting because most people do not or avoid giving praise to Sierra Village in the community. Um, it is not a universally beloved arc, but there are a lot of good elements into it in it. And early on, I in the early 2000s, I was a fan of Django. I thought that Django was a really funny
Oh,
character.
he's hilarious.
Um, so that was, like an early highlight for me. I did not start with chapter one. The first chapter I ever read was I had gotten a hold of, I think it was chapter 5 or maybe chapter 8. So whichever one is the first chapter of Orange Town.
Ooh, I'm about to make a name for
Luffy
myself
gets
here.
eaten by a bird and then dropped off. And that moment of Luffy getting eaten by a bird when I was a young teenager or preteen made me laugh, and then I stuck with it. And then I would say the moment that made things different was the Belmere flashback. That that was the moment when I realized, okay, this isn't just for fun. I have an author that wants to kind of take me places. And then Alabasta is what sort of made me forget any other manga and anime I'd read or watched after that. So, and then let's see here. Then the second part of Brandon's question was characters that you hope get more shine and development going into the rest of the final saga.
Yeah, so a couple of them are ones we've already talked about, which would be I really want Franky to get more, and I really want Smoker to get more. Those aside, I think Dragon, I would really,
Yes.
I've been. It's funny because I saw an old comment on my Logtown video where I'm like, I can't wait to learn more about Dragon, and I wasn't able to see this comment until I caught up. But someone said, me too, and when they were caught up. So Dragon for sure. Though we have gotten some cool little notes for him throughout Egghead, I think, but we need more for sure. And with regards to Straw Hats, we've gotten to the point where I think Usopp is fantastic in Dressrosa, but we've gotten to the point where throughout Egghead I was going, okay, it's coming time for Usopp to get more prominent stuff. It's time. And now we have the perfect opportunity, given where we're headed. So it would be one of the biggest fumbles in the series, I think, if Usopp wasn't extremely core to this arc. He doesn't have to be the most important character. He doesn't have to do anything specific, but he has to be important, and there needs to be some sort of payoff here. So Usopp, for sure, especially given where we're headed. And then just in terms of characters that I think are amazing, and I just want to see more of and how the story approaches them. Big News Morgans, who I adore. Just keep doing your thing.
Yep.
He's simultaneously, in terms of screen time, a minor character, but also one of the most important characters in the entire setting. He's a marvel of a character. I adore him. So just more of that. And Emu, because I think we're hitting a sort of transitionary point for Emu, and it's not like we've been lacking. I think Emu's been done, honestly, phenomenally. But just keep going with that approach, I guess, going forward. So those are a handful, I guess, of mine.
For me, I mean, it's many of, let's see, my top characters, which would, I have talked at length on my channel about all of my expectations for Vivi in the story, that at some point she will return, hopefully joining the crew officially, especially now that Alabasta's in disarray and her father is dead, until they're able to sort of restore the world to some sort of semblance of peace, where she can then actually go back to Alabasta. But for now, I feel like she doesn't have anywhere to go, so her safest bet would be with the crew. And then Crocodile. I have a lot of high hopes for Crocodile now with the Cross Guild. He always has been one of my favorite characters, and I feel like if we didn't get, Blackbeard or Emu or anything like that, like Crocodile would have made a really excellent, end of the line antagonist. And I think that there's even an opportunity for that to still happen in a way, because I feel like as we get to Laugh Tale or even in Elbaf at some point, whether it's the Oda's version of Ragnarok or not, we'll need some sort of battle royale against the four emperors, and I think that's going to be Crocodile's time to shine. He's the person that introduced us to the ancient weapons, and even when we were listening to Vegapunk's speech as he talked about ancient weapons, the panels are over panels of Crocodile and Vivi, reminding us that the connection to Alabasta and those characters are there for those elements. And when you get into analysis, of course you have to, as you were talking with the Kanjuro stuff, you have to pay attention to, not, where is the panel being drawn? What is it covering? Who's underneath the panel? These are subtle ways that authors will always sort of signal some sort of importance or foreshadowing. Well, as I'm talking about this thing, I'm going to put the character that is relevant to that in the future. And I also would really like to see a third act for Bellamy. So we had the first act where, he's complete douchebag. Then we have this sort of redemption arc where he realizes that he's been following the wrong man. And then I need that third arc where now that he has taken one of Luffy's favorite cards, he pulls up, Final War, Elbaf, Laugh Tale, wherever, with some sort of a save, maybe a sacrificial play, something that shows that he's following the right man now, where he's really just Team Luffy. And then I think that would actually create one of the greatest full circle character arcs in the entire story.
I would love that. I think that's and Bellamy was really high on your rankings too, right? He was 4 or 5, something like that, right?
Yeah.
I totally agree. I haven't actually thought about that, but it really makes a lot of sense. Because I think he was during Dressrosa, when all that stuff was happening, he was his by his perception, his life was essentially forfeit, and it was too late for him to have regrets in that moment and really change anything. The gears had started turning and things were in motion that couldn't be undone. But given how things developed and where he's at, you'd have to imagine that he now has the opportunity to have that full turnaround. And I think that would be, especially given where he started and his and Luffy's dynamic started, one, like you say, one of the best arcs in the series, one of the most comprehensive arcs, but also one of the greatest examples of, I guess, the beauty of Luffy and how he has this force of nature like storm like way to sweep other people up in his storm and almost bend them to his will in this sort of supernatural way. Obviously there's way more nuance to it than that, but the fact that he is able to, that these two are able to have this dynamic and Bellamy goes from that to something completely 180 would be, I think, incredibly, again, incredible payoff and incredibly gratifying. So that's one I haven't thought of But I really love that idea.
Yeah, it's I mean, one of my early theories, going back to the early 2000s, because I've always been a huge Bellamy fan. I mean, vibe wise, as a teenager, you know, he just kind of reminded me of the Joker. But I always saw the potential for the character. I was like, you know, we've set this thing up with Doflamingo here. It's like whenever Doflamingo comes back into prominence, I feel like Bellamy's going to return. Like he didn't die here, and you know, I think that he's going to team up with our crew. And a lot of people thought I was crazy back then. They were like, oh no, Bellamy's dead. And then, you know, 10, 15 years later or something, we start getting the Dressrosa arc, and he appears, and then it's just like, you know, it didn't work out exactly the way that I thought, because Oda went that, you know, the way where he was kind of sticking to his ideals. But that's sort of, in a way, I'm just thinking of this now, but it kind of reflects Robin's journey at the end of Alabasta, where, you know, when she pops up onto the crew and she's like, you know, she asks to join, and she basically like faults Luffy for the path that she's on. Like, I'm your responsibility now. You saved me when I didn't want to be saved. I think that that's a retread for Bellamy in a sense, because I feel like now Luffy saved Bellamy when he didn't want to be saved. So now Bellamy is Luffy's responsibility as well. And where he goes into the story will completely tie into that. And you know, there's a common sort of trend in analysis for Eustace Kid, where they say that, you know, Kid is just Luffy without plot armor. And I always argue that by saying that Bellamy was the original Kid, that he was the first Luffy without plot armor. He was the first one that we saw that like followed the wrong man. That was basically the complete opposite of, you know, or, you know, they're sort of an inversion of Luffy's journey. And even when we got that sort of small Bellamy flashback in Dressrosa, where, you know, he approaches Doflamingo, and he's just like, you know, it's kind of this idea where Doflamingo was Bellamy's Shanks, but it was like a twisted Shanks. And considering that you go to Jaya, which already inverts and has Luffy so rooted in Shanks's methodology in the bar, where, you know, he's not going to fight, he's just going to laugh everything off, and he's just going to walk out, and that's it. He's not worth his time, right? Now, you take all of that, you apply it to who Bellamy looked up to, and then to be then changed by Luffy, and have now Luffy kind of become a Shanks almost to Bellamy, you know,
right,
late in life, is just great character growth, not only for Bellamy but for Luffy as well.
Yeah. No, there are a couple things I love about that, because one is the role that would have for Luffy and his maturity, because I think a big part of Wano specifically is about he's moved past the death of Ace. Like he's healthily moved past it due to the help of a bunch of people, especially Jinbei, but he's moved past it and he's accepted it, and now he's carrying forth his legacy and his will, and being not only that, but sort of not emulating, but being his own version of what Ace was for Tama, for example, being that sort of guidance for characters throughout Wano. He plays a sort of Ace-like role, I think, for Momo. And so him being Shanks as well, I think, is just an addition to that sort of maturity that's slowly but surely been ramping up for Luffy. So yeah, I think that would be extremely cool on multiple levels. And you mentioned sort of responsibility, Luffy's responsibility for the people he saves, and just in general, Luffy's responsibility. I think a Bellamy thread in the future could be a great example, a continuing example, that because we've seen this a lot, but continuing forward, of the positive, empowering element of Luffy's decisions and his responsibility. Like that is why that is a reinforcement of why the benefits of why he is the way he is and why he is a beautiful person. But One Piece has always consistently showed the flip side of that. And with regards to responsibility, there are a couple of things that could also be approached. Like I think Oda could do a really interesting dynamic with Luffy's responsibility because there is Bartholomew, who is in a lot of ways Luffy's responsibility, and he is going haywire. He is like, and I think the threads are there for something really, really awesome going forward about Luffy thinking about his impact and the way he affects other people and the legacy he himself is leaving to other people. So that could be really cool going forward. And then just in general, I think on a broader sense, I do think that the story, it feels to me like the story is going to be leading into Luffy being a bit more aware of what he is. Because Gear 5 and him being this modern embodiment of Nika, up till this point, up till Egghead he's been very ignorant about what that means.
He still is.
And he still is. He's only now starting. He only now learned a little bit, just a tiny bit through Emmett, and he's like, "Wait, what is this? This means something to people?" Like, just a little bit of awareness. And I don't think that Oda should change Luffy's sort of, I don't really care. I only care about what I care about nature. But I think when you have that sort of status and that sort of legend attached to you, it's impossible to not. Like, I think he has to gain a bit of a greater awareness of what that means and how it affects people and his power, not just in terms of strength. So just like, I guess that's just segue into a different sort of responsibility. Just lots of interesting stuff.
I'm with you 100% on that. I don't think that Oda will ever change the idea that Luffy only cares about what he cares about. But what Oda will do is find an organic way for Luffy to be told the responsibility, but his reasoning for why he enacts upon that responsibility is something different. Something that will still be related to a person or food or anything like that. And the end result will be the responsibility. But Luffy's methodology to achieving it will still be rooted in Luffy, if that makes sense. But the I've been saying this a lot recently, as you know, the conversations for Elbaf are ramping up because everybody's like, all right, Usopp's arc, and you know, weekly everybody was saying the same thing in Wano, Zoro's arc, which it didn't end up being, but I do feel like there will be a lot of emphasis on Usopp, and that he'll have his own sort of, you know, trajectory that he'll go on in Elbaf. But Elbaf will be Luffy's arc, because this is going to be the arc where he has to get the lowdown on everything that is Sun God related, Nika related, because this is the god of the entire people here. So they're going to be able to give him more specifics about things, and especially considering that any giant there has a shot at their immediate grandfather being alive while Nika was around. Well, Joy Boy. So the tales that they're given, you know, are not, you know, like 12 generations in Alabasta. It's Kohor's the 12th head of the Alabasta dynasty. It's just going to be 3 generations. So they're going to be getting, you know, third-hand accounts of who Joy Boy was, what prophecy or timetable they're actually on for certain events to happen, and whether Luffy cares or not, he's going to find out about it. And it's going to be a thing, I think, that will echo Luffy's sentiment at Fishman Island. I mean, it would be nice to invert it, but him saying, you know, whether I'm a hero or not, that's for you guys to decide. Of course, I'm paraphrasing the line, and there's multiple translations of it, but Luffy being told that he is a god is something that he's just going to toss aside. God or not, that's for you guys to decide. I don't care. I don't think of myself as that, but it's cool that you guys do. I'm just the most free. And that element may entice them to, you know, be more endeared to him at that point. But I also would love a scenario, you know, just to, I always want more tension. I always want more drama. And I think that there should be an element of individuals thinking that Luffy is a false prophet, you know, that they don't believe that it's actually him, and that Luffy has to reluctantly and indirectly make them believers. And I think a simple way to do this is if, you know, Luffy is so, you know, can't go Gear 5 without, you know, eating, then, you know, a plot thread that we could follow in Elbaf is we get there and it's the winter solstice and nobody's eating. So they're withholding food. If there's problems that are happening, if there's fights going on, if Luffy gets to a point where he can't go Gear 5 without eating and no one wants to give him food, then no one's going to know that he's their sun god. And they're just going to be going off of the hearsay of Dory, Brogy, Oimo, Kashi, and some of these other giants, and they're just going to be like, yeah, whatever, until he finally gets some food, and then everybody sees him go into the Nika form, and one of the older, you know, guys is just like, oh, that's what my dad said, you know, he looked like. Like,
yeah.
I don't know.
No, yeah, that's a really interesting idea of sort of non-believers, and it's such an organic thing to happen, right? It seems like a no-brainer that sort of thing will crop up as his exploits continue to gather speed. So I think that would be really cool. But like you said, the thing to gather people onto his side won't be him trying to be a god, or him trying to be anything that he isn't. The reason he is this modern incarnation, this modern version, whatever you want to call it, is because he is no one but himself. The god stuff, the mythic figure of hope and dreams, all that stuff is a byproduct of who he is. He's not doing it because he wants to be that. He is that because that's just fundamentally, heart and soul, is what he embodies. And so I really like what you said about his methodology and how he'll sort of contextualize it, because I think the maturation and awareness we're gonna get for Luffy is knowledge, rather than him changing any philosophies or anything. I would really not want him to change for anything. And labels and whatever, he's not gonna care about that. But I think the reason why he needs to gain this greater awareness is because something that Oda consistently tackles, firstly, is that the idea of leaders and power and how it should be used responsibly. Luffy has a great amount of symbolic power, and that sort of knowledge is something that should be used responsibly. That sort of knowledge, that sort of influence. But in addition, like, the way he's going to frame it, I think, is not that I need to, I have this extra responsibility, I need to change what I'm doing because I'm a god, whatever. It is because, okay, it's going to be consistent, I think, with what he's been the whole time, which is, how does this affect me or the things I care about? Because of the people I care about. Mm-hmm. And I think that's just going to maybe add another layer to his actions, or make him realize different ways in which he can help the people he cares about. But it's not going to change anything about that. Like Luffy, people tend to talk about, I've seen this at least, Luffy as a static character, which I don't agree with personally. I think there's some traits of him that are unchanging, but he has, from the beginning till now, very gradually, very subtly gone through multiple underlying arcs and gone to view his relationship with his power and his responsibility and the people he cares about and the type of person he wants to be differently due to his experiences. And I think this is going to be another of the 4 or 5 significant stepping stones that he'll go through throughout the story on the way to becoming the fully formed king of the pirates, you know?
And I think that will be even more accentuated if we get Vivi back into the story, because I think that some of Luffy's best moments of growth came from her. You know, a lot of his traits on leadership, going back to Drum, teaching him to, the bow scene is something that I go back to as like a very big moment in Luffy's growth when he, is being taught how to not be as impulsive as he normally is, to stop and think for a moment. And you actually can see several different points in the story where he kind of remembers this moment and goes back to it. Like in Amazon Lily, he bows to get Marguerite and the other sisters from the Kuja tribe depetrified from Hancock. And so it's like you can actually pinpoint a moment where Luffy wasn't static and had growth. And Alabasta, I'm very vocal, is my favorite arc in the entire series. And I think that is emblematic of just Luffy as a character when you consider that he's going into this situation. He's entering this island. There's a major war, a major conflict that is happening between, the royals and the rebels and all of this. And Luffy doesn't care about any of that, only because it's taking Vivi's smile away. This is his friend. She is upset. Who do I have to hurt to put the smile back on her face? Whatever happens after that is fine. It's just collateral. He meets Toto. He becomes endeared to Toto. And Toto gives him water. So he wants to now make sure that Yuba doesn't get hit with a sandstorm by Crocodile because he likes this old man. So now he's even, doubly invested in taking down Crocodile. Now, not only because of Vivi, but also because of Toto. Not because there's a million people on the line. And that's the difference between, it's just Luffy's character in a nutshell. He's not a hero. He does heroic things by proxy of helping the people that he becomes endeared to or cares about. So if Vivi were to come back into the story and play a role in Elbaf, and she is also privy to some of this knowledge, which would be good for her to know, because now that we know that she's a D, now that we know that Lily, took part in all of this, it's probably just as important for her to hear whatever Luffy ends up hearing. And the responsibility that Luffy won't feel can then fall on her, because in a way, I think that Vivi would also shoulder that particular responsibility, having had, ancestor potentially having some sort of hand in the way that the world is, and then thus wanting to help get it back to some sort of semblance of normalcy. And she can be that voice of that responsibility to the point where, maybe we even invert and get a situation similar to the end of Alabasta, where, she's addressing all of the people of Alabasta, but now, much like Vegapunk's address, she's addressing the world and being a someone that characters trust in the world, a figure, sort of like, this Princess Diana kind of type of character, just someone that people are endeared to regardless. She'll have an easier time getting through to people and and maybe even letting them trust and believe in Luffy in a way because she does.
Right. No, yeah, the more you talk about it, I think there are tons of really important narrative reasons outside of just loving Vivi and wanting her to be back with with her family. Well, her other family, you know.
Yeah.
For her to like, there's lots of narrative reasons for why that makes a lot of sense. We talking about responsibility. You know, Luffy is going to, like we were talking about. There's going to be a slight shift. It's not going to change his character, but there's going to be a slight shift. But you look at the crew and what their role is going to be going forward, I guess. Considering what they're going to learn, hopefully on Elbaf, about really what's going on and what is underway, and how history defining it is, and how they're at the center of it. Is there someone on the crew who is that public figure who can garner that support, who has that sort of political acumen, who sort of embraces it? I'm sure there are characters who could try on the Straw Hats, who could try, but it's not their thing. It's not anything anyone would do particularly well, I don't think. So with the gathering pace and influence and awareness that the Straw Hats are going to get with regards to what they're actually doing, I think Vivi joining the crew, as well as her personal situation, like you've mentioned before, rejoining the crew just makes so much sense for that. The emu stuff as well. It all just makes sense for me for that to be the sort of structure. And Elbaf feels like a good place for it to happen. It really does.
Especially given she was a part of Little Garden.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. It really lines up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, this isn't something I thought about particularly, but you've not that I need much to be like, yeah, more Vivi in the story, but you've got me on board for that sort of train of thought. It makes a lot of sense. And I guess as long as we're done with that point, I'm curious about it's probably a really sort of monotonous, or I don't know, monotonous, but very common theory question. It's definitely one that's very common for me, so it must be a huge one for you. But I'm curious about your take on the whole idea of the final villain, because that just had me thinking about Emu. The whole idea of the final villain and where you think the series is going with regards to that. People say Emu, Blackbeard, some other ones once in a while, Buggy, Shanks, whatever. So I'm curious about what you think about that.
I mean, thematically, if you had asked me in the early 2000s, I might have said Kobe.
Yeah.
Because it's the character that is diametrically opposed to Luffy that was introduced in Chapter 2, and if you want a full circle story, you're going to have Luffy fight Kobe. And with Kobe's renewed focus on, like, preventing Luffy from reaching his dream, there is a possibility for that, although, I think it would end up just being, some talk no jutsu, and they would end up side by side. I wouldn't be opposed to a team up between Luffy and Kobe versus Emu for the end. So it's like Kobe realizing, what's going on with the government and having another, sort of turn character that in the Marines that we kind of talked about earlier. But it's one of those things where I have gotten this question a lot, and I don't know exactly where I want to stand on it personally. Because there's many different ways to go about it, and it also kind of depends on what the order of events are. So it's like, are we going to Elbaf, then to Laugh-Tale, then to the Holy Land? Or are we just going from Elbaf to Laugh-Tale, Lodestar, something like that? I think that some sort of events need to take place in order for the story to wrap up neatly in my interpretation, which is, yes, Luffy needs to become the Pirate King. Zoro versus Mihawk should happen. And I think that, we're promised it and it will. I am of the belief that I would prefer that there is some form of a Luffy versus Shanks. I say this a lot, but I would like the Zoro versus Mihawk to be as a result of a Davy back fight. Because they do not have the poneglyph rubbings and they need Robin. So playing that game to get all of those items with everything resting on Zoro versus Mihawk gives it sort of a kind of organic way to happen. But we have to go get the One Piece at Laugh Tale. And I feel like that is where we would generally fight Blackbeard. Because I feel like that's where we would meet him, and unless what we're being told now about, Blackbeard's goals and everything, does he actually not care about the One Piece and would prefer to be king of the world, meaning that he wants to sit on the Iron Throne? So then are we fighting Blackbeard actually at the Holy Land instead? Which would then bring up the question, does Blackbeard take out Emu and, and then insert himself as the final character, but the final villain? But this is why there's just so many ways that things can go. But I think that at the end of the story, we do have to topple the world government. The world government needs to be completely dismantled and then restructured. The government, probably, in my envisionment, would be restructured by Vivi leading, a bunch of good nobles and kings and queens to kind of establish a new government that is more focused on peace. And then Kobe, Smoker, Fujitora, whoever's alive at the end of all of it that is, good, would be the characters that are restructuring the marine system to keep the peace in the world. And so it's, are we riding into the Holy Land already as the Pirate King and the world's greatest swordsman and all of this, and getting to see our crew that have been fighting for these laurels and these titles this entire time, are we going to be able to revel and sort of live in that for an arc? Or do we end the story with them achieving that and just a slight epilogue? And that's sort of where I can't figure out where Oda's going to go with that. But me personally, I would love to see the reactions of people as Luffy arrives somewhere to fight one more villain after he's already gotten the One Piece and he is the Pirate King, and almost solidifying the title in a way.
With regards to that idea, have you played a decent amount of Final Fantasy, or at least a couple games from the series?
My wife has. I've played some parts of some, and I'm familiar with a couple of them, but not enough to have a deeper conversation outside of probably 7.
Okay. I'll hold off on that then. But no, I totally agree. It's the thing with this is with the question like that, or just like in general, a lot of times there's pressure that you have to have a take on what exactly is going to happen, or what exactly you want to happen. When the truth of this is, I think it's really dynamic, and it, like you said, it depends on the sequence of events that lead up to it. But I think it also depends on what complexion of the theming Oda wants to provide. Because, like you said, Blackbeard could go beyond what we've perceived him as. I've, for the majority of the series, thought of him as the One Piece conflict, the One Piece antagonist. And I still just inherently feel that when I think of Blackbeard. maybe over time that'll shift, but that's just my knee-jerk reaction to hearing his name. So maybe that's the thing. And then Emu is the greater than the One Piece world-defining final boss. I think it all depends, and the world government being tied into that is really important. It just all depends, and I think the direction that Oda wants to take that theming, and I think go with Emu's character, because I think there's a lot of parallels with regards to Emu and Luffy. Emu just destroying Lelouch being juxtaposed by Luffy's dream. That's not a coincidence. And I think Emu's very I don't know another way to put this outside of like juvenile and childlike in the way that they react to and experience events. There is a sort of there's a sort of volatility there that reminds me a little bit of Luffy, and just in general, I think the more of that gets divulged, and the more parallels or lack of parallels we can see between Emu and Luffy, we'll be able to tell whether they'll be the sort of final boss, or they'll be the penultimate, or Blackbeard will be it, or whatever. But the one thing you mentioned there that I really like, and that I've kind of had in my mind as something that would fit, is some variant of Luffy and Shanks having a confrontation. Because the moment he saw what happened in Wano, I think something changed in him. Shanks, I think something changed in him. I think he started. He saw what was going on. I think Luffy, in his mind, has become a proper pirate, but to become the proper pirate, to fulfill the promise, what better way than to defeat him? And because right after that happens, he goes for the One Piece. It's not because he wants to be the king of the pirates.
And I don't think it's not when I say that, I don't mean that it's Shanks is a bad guy, that he's an antagonist. It's that. Yeah. But when I think of the promise that the two of them made, I always think of it in terms of Luffy believing that it is strength-based. That the only way for him, in his mind, to prove to Shanks that he is a great pirate is to defeat him. So, it's... I always say, like, a moment that I really want to see is, Luffy punching Shanks after, if we go back to chapter 1, Luffy constantly bragging that, his punch is like a pistol. If he hits Shanks with a gum pistol, and then Shanks says, wow, punch really is a pistol now, huh, Luffy? Like, then we have this circle thing going back. So it's like, and you only get that if they fight.
Yes, yeah.
So that's why, and now with Shanks saying that he is in opposition to Luffy, saying that he is going to go after the One Piece, which is Luffy's dream, then there's going to be a moment where Shanks is going to say, if you want to get it, then you have to go through me, meaning that Shanks could potentially be the boss of Laugh Tale. And it could be framed as a test. He already knows what's behind there. He had conversations with Rayleigh. He had conversations with Roger. He has been training Luffy his entire life for this. But the only way that he's going to let him get past him is by getting past him. So in that regard, then, that's a version where we fight Blackbeard at the Holy Land. He has all of the ancient weapons at this point. He, in that, there's a version where Emu is a red herring and gets one-shotted by Blackbeard, or, taken out off-screen by Blackbeard, and now Blackbeard is the king of the world. We don't know what his plans are. Blackbeard had a very methodical plan pre-time skip that went off the rails, and then somehow, as his crew would call it, fate would realign it. When anything went wrong, something came in and helped him get there. So his people, they think he's the Messiah. And what he is interested in is at the Holy Land. He hasn't really been talking about the One Piece. He's talking about he wants Hachinosu to be a recognized state. He wants to use someone as a bargaining chip to get there. He sent Devon and Augur to Egghead, and so that they could get access. Blackbeard's always about access. His whole plan pre-timeskip was to get access to Impel Down. So now everything he's doing now is to get access to whatever is the hidden treasure in the Holy Land, which is probably the ancient weapon, the access to what destroyed the Lucia, if it is in fact Uranus. And the more I'm talking about this now, I'm almost talking myself out of Blackbeard even being at Laughtail, because he's also going to meet with Caribou now. Caribou's going to tell him about Shirahoshi. Caribou's going to tell him about Pluton being underneath Wano. What does Blackbeard have? He has a character that can literally fuse with an island. So if he just sends Avalo Pizarro to Wano, Pizarro is going to be able to find where Pluton is underground in 5 seconds. It's going to be a very easy way for him to unearth this ancient weapon, which is something that Crocodile thought was in Alabasta, and thought that his sand powers would have been able to unearth it if he just knew the location. And then it's like, there's another thing that brings Crocodile potentially back into things, where it's like, does he go to Wano? Does he know that Pluton's there? He was obsessed with finding Pluton. Where does the Cross Guild like come into all of this? And they are my favorite faction right now, so that is the thing I'm most excited about. But you start getting into these other layers, and the rabbit holes of Blackbeard and Emu they're deep.
For sure. One of the biggest things about Blackbeard has always been, to me, this sort of inverse, this sort of contrast and parallel and inverse with Luffy. Obviously, we have the scene, his first scene. It speaks for itself. But he is, in so many ways, a bastardization of a lot of the things that our protagonistic characters, particularly Luffy, Whitebeard, stand for. Everything that they stand for. This sort of festering, just, I don't know what else to, like, he reverses everything in on itself through darkness and bastardization of these values or these things that he sort of manipulates himself. He takes Whitebeard's fruit. He has a lot of parallels with Luffy, because someone who is so, you can't really truly be opposite to someone narratively in a lot of ways without having a lot of common grounds, because then you can see the path through which they diverge. So I think this just like this endless hunger, this endless inversion of the world and these concepts. Blackbeard is like a black hole, and I think he can just keep climbing up and up and up. And there's the whole thing with him being such an advocate of dreams, but apparently not sleeping. Like there's so many things there through which thematically him being the end would make a lot of sense. And we kind of get a situation where it's like, holy, I've been thinking of Blackbeard as the One Piece for so much of the story, but suddenly, no, he's much more than that. He is more than anything, and I feel like it would feel kind of sudden, but in the most fitting way. So yeah, I think there's a lot of merit in that sort of direction for Blackbeard, and I could see a world where he just dismisses Emu, and then I do, just to go back on Shanks, I really do think that he's going to play a pretty vital role in that. I've seen some people thinking that he'll die, just really unexpectedly. I don't think anything's impossible given
not without beating Luffy first.
Right.
We're
like,
promised
that
we're promised that meeting. That's going to happen. Like they're going to have a conversation about the hat, whether it's keep it looks better on you or anything like that. Whatever trope Oda wants to go with that. that is still like going to happen. It's not going to be a thing where off screen or away from Luffy, Shanks is going to die, and then like, oh, now he wants to go after Blackbeard because of that. Luffy's got enough reason to go after Blackbeard. And the things that you were saying about Blackbeard, you know, are correct. And I think that there is more merit to Blackbeard being the final villain thematically, just because of their opposition. The first scene that the two of them share, you know, it's the panels are highlighting the fact that they are like this yin and yang. The pie is good, the pie is bad. The apple juice is good, the apple juice is bad. You know, or cider, whatever it is. And now with Luffy being the sun god and him being a visage of darkness, they are yin and yang. So it's, if you want to go into a full circle story, I would prefer that Blackbeard is the final villain rather than Emu, who was just introduced 200 chapters ago, and go with the person that was introduced 1,000 chapters ago or more, really, when you think about when they were name dropped. So yeah, but the more we talk about it, the more I feel like Blackbeard is going to be an obstacle separate from Laughtail. Whether he's there, if he is there, there's an opportunity that he becomes the Pirate King, and then Luffy has to take that title from him, you know. But one thing that I know for sure is that Buggy will be at Laughtail. And that I feel like is something that is promised to us. I feel like that is the joke that Oda will not refrain himself to do. And I talked about this recently, but like, I want a situation where Buggy finds the One Piece first, and an inversion that I want in the story, depending on how we get it. I don't care who it is, but if Roger laughed, I need a scene where someone doesn't. So I don't know who that person is. I'd love if it was Buggy. Buggy, who didn't get to go to Laughtail, sees the One Piece, puts together everything that he knows about Roger, anything that he might have heard offhand, and realizes that whatever this isn't for him. And we get this character growth for Buggy where he just sort of leaves and no one knows that he found it first. Allowing Luffy to, come in and get it, and maybe Luffy laughs. But the other option would be that we get some sort of a Rocks flashback, and I feel like as we learn more about Rocks, I can only imagine that he knows more about the world than we're led to believe. So it's like if it was a thing where Rocks on his own was able to get to Laughtail, found it, and that's what made him want to become king of the world, or try and, there's an opportunity for Rocks to actually be a sympathetic character and not be this evil person. We were told about him from Sengoku, who is not a reliable narrator. It could all just be propaganda. And to think about the people that he had on his team, including Whitebeard, who we know is not an evil person, like there had to have been something that endeared Whitebeard to Rocks. And if he wasn't actually as bad as he's being, set out and labeled, then that could be interesting. Like if he went to Laughtail and we see him and he didn't laugh, he just got mad and fired up about everything, but inspired Roger to go out and figure it out. And then he came to his own conclusion, which is a line that Rayleigh has in the Archipelago. When you get there, maybe you'll come to your own conclusion. So what I need to see is other people having their own conclusions to whatever the One Piece is.
Yeah, I love that idea of Buggy potentially not laughing, Buggy getting there first and not laughing.
He's a clown.
Yeah,
invert the clown.
Exactly. It's because of the contrast. Because like you think of Buggy, and I think he's one of the most intelligently written and cleverly written characters in the whole thing. The ways that he contrasts Luffy, the way that he has this bizarre charisma, but undeniable charisma that gathers people to his storm, very Luffy-like. That leaders, that's a very rare trait that leaders tend to have, that he's really unique with. The way that he continuously falls upward in this way that he has luck, but also he makes his own luck, and a lot of it's a deceptive amount of it is through merit. Like, he's so cleverly written. I adore Buggy, and whenever I think of him, I think of and the sort of the way he's used and communicated throughout the story. He's very expressive. We have those scenes of the Cross Guild where he's crying because he feels threatened by Mihawk and Crocodile, or he's gesticulating and rallying the troops, or he's laughing or whatever. He's super expressive. He's one of the most expressive characters, and extremely expressive, like very on an extreme level in the story. So what better way to have impact through a non-reaction than through the character who arguably reacts the most? Like, that sounds really cool to me, and would be a great precursor to whatever developments would happen after that with Luffy.
Yeah,
I haven't thought a lot about endgame Buggy because he's so chaotic. It's harder to define. It's been harder for me to define where I think his story will go, outside of very broad stroke stuff. But I love that idea. Of course, I think a lot of things need to be set up for that to work out.
for sure.
But if Oda wants to go that direction, that's another thing where the payoff is just so it's all there. It's monumental. I love that idea.
At the end of the day, I mean, he didn't get to go there with Roger, and neither did Shanks. So I feel like both of them need to be there together, and sort of have that. If you don't mind, could you? I have to step away for a minute, and if you just talk to chat, and I'll be right back.
Sure, no problem. Okay, I'm hijacking the stream. What's up? So, share piece. What do you guys think is endgame Buggy? Luffy forgetting Buggy balls on. Well, that's the thing. That's one of Buggy's greatest sort of I guess quiet. It's still really expressive, but the reason that the Buggy balls moment is so funny to me is because it's a more kind of a bit of a subtler expression, and the contrast. I personally wouldn't like anyone other than the core 10 Straw Hats stepping foot on Laugh Tale by the end. I can see why. I don't feel that way because I think there's a select few for which that could work, and I think Buggy is one for which that would work, because of his specific circumstances. But I see it. I think it's got to be very meticulously done. If Blackbeard doesn't laugh, that could be huge as well. That's another huge contrast. Because he's very expressive as well, outwardly expressive in the way we were talking about. How will he get the poneglyph rubbings? He'll do Buggy things. He'll stumble onto it. No, a similar thing could be done with Blackbeard. I like we were talking about. I think it all depends on how the scale of the conflict ramps up, and where he ends up, because you could go either direction with it. Shanks needs to be there with Buggy. I would like some sort of interaction between Shanks and Buggy, especially given the backstory. Yeah, I agree. We weren't talking about that, but people were also just talking about some sort of resolution between Shanks and Buggy specifically, and why that would be important. And that's definitely something I think should be paid off to an extent.
I think it's owed.
Yeah, definitely.
Blazing Blue super chatted, thank you. Said, a neat connection in Egghead is how Garp's lesson of leaving the old man behind to save the child parallels Vegapunk dying and escaping with Bonnie and Lilith, a younger version of Vegapunk. Any thoughts? Blazing Blue said, love you guys. Appreciate that, Blazing. I love that connection. I love that parallel there, especially considering that we were taught that lesson in the arc. But it also, the thing that I love about that is how it also shows and adds a deeper layer to what is currently or what was happening between Kuzan and Garp, because Kuzan is someone that was Garp's pupil, and he, saved the child and left old men behind in Ohara, showing that he was also, very ingrained in that teaching.
Sorry, could you read that out again, just so I hear it one more time?
Blazing Blue said a neat connection in Egghead is how Garp's lesson from the flashback during Hachinosu, when he was telling Kobe, he taught him about leaving an old. Basically, what would you do if you had an old man and a child on an island, but you couldn't fit them all on a boat? Garp was saying you leave the old man on the island and you save the child. And Kobe was saying I would put them on the boat and I would stay on the island. And so this Blazing Blue was saying that it parallels Vegapunk dying and escaping with Bonnie and Lilith.
It does. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, it definitely does.
I hadn't either.
Yeah, that's cool. There's a lot of, I think, especially in Egghead and Wano, especially Egghead and I guess post Wano, there's a lot of thematic bridges. I think Garp forms a bridge into the new era for Kobe to walk upon, and provides this sort of foundation for that through these piercing questions and just his training. I think Vegapunk, who's super conflicting, but wants his legacy to be one that's loyal to, I guess, what's within his heart more so than his mistakes, tries to provide that bridge as well. Shanks is a bridge to the new era. So that's a really cool sort of thematic note through that parallel. That's really cool.
Off-brand Superden said Apu beats Shanks because he can't cover both ears, which is funny. Although I feel like Shanks' hockey would probably knock Apu out.
You'd imagine.
I'd imagine. After what we saw at Elbaf. But yeah, I guess if Apu caught Shanks by surprise, there's not much he can do. Then Dawn Knight 1993, member for 20 months, said, what does it mean to be free? Not just in the One Piece world, but also in the real world. Getting very existential here. I think if we're talking about the real world and being free, I think freedom, a sense of freedom in the real world for me is knowing yourself. So if you know yourself, you know what you like, what you don't like, what any sort of triggers you have, or things that would upset you, or things that make you happy, then you can kind of live the way that you want, the way that Luffy does.
And that has to do with sort of the reason that Luffy can be so free is because I think he knows himself very well, and he lives honestly with regards to that, wholly. I think a lot of the characters who you see as not really free avoid elements of themselves, or avoid to confront elements of themselves. So I'm with that as well.
Muglatant just supered and said serious thoughts on Green Bull, his future role, etc. Well, you just read it. What's your thoughts on Green Bull?
He's really, I don't know how to put my finger on him just yet. I think he offers a unique dimension to, again, that side of, I guess, the plot, through this just festering, burning disdain, and I think a great amount of pride and aspirations and desire to prove himself, which is, I think, very different when you think of those sorts of characters. So I like that. I like those sort of foundations established, and he's definitely fun through how insane he is. In terms of his role going forward, I kind of struggle. I don't really know. I personally wasn't super hot on him. While finding him interesting, I'm just like, I wanted a bit more to have something to grasp onto before being properly invested in his character. Then I heard his voice in the anime, and one of my favorite voice actors is voicing him, and that was enough. And that was, well, because Keiji Fujiwara passed away a few years ago, right?
Which is something I can't think about. I can't think about Green Bull without thinking about that.
Right. I hadn't watched the anime, so my reaction to him was his new actor, which is Junichi Suabe, who does Sukuna and JJK and other stuff. And I love him. And actually, the voice got me very invested in him going forward, because it made me think about him a little bit differently, and I was just fanboying a little bit. So the TLDR is, I don't really know what to think of him outside of him being this sort of chaos factor, but I like the dynamic he adds to the sort of antagonistic texture. He has a cool new texture to it, and a new personality. But I don't really know how to put my finger on him just yet.
What I like about Green Bull is he checks a box of characters that I am fairly certain that Oda will not try to redeem or give some sort of like arc to. My concern is that Oda finds ways to make so many characters sympathetic and like kind of turn to our side that at the end of the story I'm like, who are we fighting?
Yeah.
So, and now with Sakazuki basically saying that he is going after the One Piece as well, it makes me want him to kind of assemble some sort of super group of Marines that are also going after the One Piece, in which I would expect Green Bull to be kind of his like tag along or right hand, because he's such a like Barto level fanboy for Sakazuki in the first place. And I think an interesting thing is if we do get fights at the end of the story against admirals. I don't see a world where we actually like fight against Fujitora, because I feel like he's the most likely to kind of go against the government, and we've already seen him do it in Dressrosa. But if we end up seeing a situation where Kizaru stays with the government in a similar way to Bellamy kind of reluctantly still following Doflamingo's orders, then I could see like Zoro fighting Kizaru, and I could see Sanji fighting Green Bull, and I like a Sanji Green Bull fight because Green Bull is already like kind of touted how he has a resistance to fire, but does he have a resistance to like freak Janbei? You know, like a different level of fire. And it would also kind of be a... I think thematically, if Zoro fights Kizaru and Sanji fights Green Bull, it would almost be like having Sanji and Zoro fight. Because here you have this literal moss head that would be one of Sanji's like final opponents, and then Kizaru, as speed based as he is, would and you know he also does a lot of leg attacks. So I feel like that kind of there's some interesting things there. So that's kind of where I want to see Green Bull's character go. But outside of that, I don't have too many high hopes, and I was underwhelmed by how he ended in Wano. Like, I was very excited for the prospect of him arriving, and then Shanks pulled up conveniently to say, go see Film Red, and then left. Which, if you didn't know, that was the timing of it. Like,
I see.
Film Red was coming out, and then Shanks just kind of appeared in the story, and a lot of people's criticisms at that time were, was this always planned, or are we promoting the movie?
Gotcha. Uh, I get that. I do love what you said about this. Has been something we've been touching on throughout the stream, but don't make him nuanced and layered, and don't give him this a big backstory. Like, you're right in that if too many characters get sympathetic and delved into and gray rather than very villainous or antagonistic, it is very much who are we fighting. I think it muddies the thematics of the Marines as well, and what the world government, the Marines specifically, mean within the story in a way that could be not very good. And I just generally, it makes the cast bloated. Like, you need to balance things out. There needs to be some simpler characters. You don't want every character, every panel to be. You don't want to be reflecting on a sympathetic backstory or very nuanced dynamics all the time. Sometimes it needs to be simple and raw. Like, that's it. And he's a prime character for that. Just keep him the way he is. But I hope he has a plan. A plan for him is all. And what you say would be really cool. I think that would be really cool.
Yeah, I just don't want it to be too deep. There's too many characters that need to be serviced that I don't I don't need all that extra time on a character that was just created in the final saga. Lucy B super chatted and said, "How will Loki look like? Remember, he was not Lola's type, although she asks anyone to marry her." And what's Alexandr's favorite arc? Well, I do have my thoughts on what Loki will look like, but you want to answer the favorite arc question?
Yeah. So, I think if I had to definitively say an arc, and the last thing I formally said was Wano, because of the self-contained story within it and the series-spanning payoffs and how much the Roger laugh scene means to me. Gear 5, Momo's arc, great Straw Hat stuff throughout. I really love Wano. However, lately in the past few weeks I have been revisiting other favorites. And ground is being made up, and I'm not as confident as I was in it being my favorite as I was when I finished it. And Marineford's a huge contender to being my favorite. Every time I think about Skypiea, I'm just like, is this my favorite arc? Water 7 Eni's Lobby is like the paragon of consistency in the series. So I guess the formal answer is Wano, but it's very fluid. Like, there's a bunch of challengers. And you said Alabasta is your favorite.
Yes.
Alabasta is one of the most important for me, and it's one of my favorites. I don't think it'll ever be my favorite, but like, it is right up there and one of the most, I think, important in the whole series, and I really adore it too.
It set up pretty much everything we're going after in the final saga here. It was our first time that we ever heard of a poneglyph of an ancient weapon. It was our first Vegapunk invention with Lasso, the baseball sneezing gun dog.
Oh, right.
And explored the corruption within the Marines, led into the introduction of the Gorosei in the first place, the events of it. Yeah, I don't know. It kick-started everything that we're after. So I love it. And then as far as what Loki will look like, I still stand by Loki being one of probably being one of Oda's like goofier designs, like more in the style of like a Wapol, an Orochi, a Foxy. Like I don't know if we're gonna get like this radically handsome, cool Loki or something. Like, we're not gonna get a Katakuri or a King for Loki. Although, based on the way that you've worded this, Lucy, like how Lola asks anyone to marry her. Like, I mean, maybe that is the joke, is that he's
Yeah.
just like insanely handsome. Um, so that's why it's not her type. So I guess it could go either way at that point, but we shall see in several months.
If that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I personally think, we're on our way to Elbaf, but we're not going to get there for 3 to 5 chapters, and then even then we'll spend a bunch of time setting things up, and by that point it may be January before we even see like a silhouette of Loki.
Yeah.
If I'm being realistic with the weekly grind.
Yeah, Oda loves his transitions, the gradual transitions. So I'm not expecting anything imminent at all.
And he had a
yeah.
generational run from 1079 to 1089, where he went to everything with Hachinosu, going back to the Reverie, Cobra's death, back to Hachinosu again, the Shanks and Kid stuff, like Cross Guild, Buggy declaring his dream. There's what I want is another. Realistically, I would take another 10 chapters where we're not even with the Straw Hats, just setting up everything else that needs to be set up.
Same.
But we'll see what happens. I mean, Oda did something that was kind of uncharacteristic for him during Egghead, where he was like the early chapters were being split, which isn't something he would do. He normally would sort of dedicate chapters to everything, but instead, half would be Egghead, then we go to Winter Island or something, or go to Elbaf for 2 pages at the end. And he could do that in Elbaf, where we're in Elbaf and then he's jumping to the Cross Guild. We're in Elbaf, he's jumping to this, if he wants to stay with the Straw Hats. But I prefer, let's get it all out there. Let's just give me another entire chapter of just what the Cross Guild is doing, them leaving Empty Bluffs, setting out for the One Piece on their stupid boat that they just got.
Yeah, one of the coolest things about One Piece, I think, is that a lot of stories in general, but especially long running stories, to do that properly, you need to have chapters or sections of stories, story that do very mechanical, functional things. Like you have to do your setup, you have to do your transitioning. That's just storytelling 101. And sometimes that's less exciting for people. But the thing with One Piece is arguably the most exciting thing is those chapters, is catching up with the world, seeing how pieces on the board are posturing and sort of being manipulated, and all the players moving throughout because of all the hundreds and hundreds of chapters that they've been built up, and how exciting that is. So I think Oda has hit on something really special with the fact that mechanical setup and those functional chapters can be highlights in their own right. So just lean into that. I want a ton of that going forward, and I think it would be out of character for there not to be.
Now, I think that I would probably be remiss to not take advantage of the unique perspective of how you recently got into the series and the way you went about it, if I didn't ask questions like, what has been your favorite element of getting into the series, and even just the way that you've absorbed it over the past 2.5 years now?
Yeah, my favorite thing about getting into the series, or
like what would you say is something that has consistently drawn you to it, and kept you excited about it?
On a broad scale,
Yeah.
Talking broad strokes,
Yeah.
generally how just fresh and dynamic the story is. And then to sort of dig into that more specifically, a pattern you pick up on, I think everyone's picked up on, is that Oda definitely varies things up from arc to arc consistently. Um, Whether it be length, the style of the or approach of the arc, having this grand sprawling epic of Skypia, and then Long Ring, Long Land, having this incredibly dark and very serious and sort of gritty arc in Water 7 Enies Lobby, and then going into Thriller Bark or something. Like, the series consistently almost presents something and then examines it with story developments that follow. So like and Oda's never stopped doing this. Another recent example is Wano is this grand story about stories, but most of all, I think Wano's about dreams. I think it's just about the beauty and the importance of not letting go of a dream, in spite of how hopeless it may seem. What I love about Egghead is it is like diametrically opposite to that. I think Egghead, on a thematic basis, examines dreams, but also then also I think Wano's a celebration of certain aspects of humanity, whereas Egghead criticizes quite strongly elements of humanity, but then with regards to dreams, touts the importance of, while don't ever stop dreaming, ensuring that you keep your feet on the ground while doing so, in terms of understanding the implications of that dream and being responsible about it. So we have Vegapunk, who has these insane dreams, who went about it in ways that sort of betrayed the person he is at heart and the regrets he has about that, and the feelings of how his legacy will cascade throughout the ages, and him really wanting his lasting sentiment to be one that's loyal to himself, because he didn't really dream responsibly in a lot of ways. So basically, the TLDR is that Oda does a really interesting metatextual, self-referential thing with the way he structures his story and his arcs, in a way that always has me on my toes, always keeps me guessing, and in a way that's just really engaging to sort of examine and sort of guess where things are going to go. And a lot of my favorite stories vary things up between arcs. Like Hunter x Hunter's so different from arc to arc.
So different.
Incredibly different. It's One Piece and Hunter x Hunter, I think, are creative stream of consciousnesses of stories. But there's something unique to One Piece in the way that it refers upon itself. And you can almost feel like every arc is like, okay, Oda was feeling this, like he was kind of sick of doing this style, then he did this, and so it feels kind of personal. It feels like a look into his creative process in a way that I think is unique to other series, and in a way that just really keeps me that really sort of enchanted me really quickly, and that I don't think Oda's ever stopped doing, just he does it in different ways. And so my relationship with that aspect of it has been one of the things I take away from the most, and the thing that, when you asked that question, came to mind first.
I love that answer, man. I think that dreams is a broad theme. It can be filed into several different arcs, but it's something that is encompassing for the entire series, and and even treasure falls into that category as well, but more so that treasure doesn't have to be physical, so that found family, the people that you're around, those can be your treasure. A hat can be treasure, and I like the sentimentality of that. And an interesting thing that you were talking about when you're bringing up the variance of the villains as well. Something that I've noticed is that a lot of the villains that we end up running into the series are sort of a hyper version of a negative Luffy trait, or a hyper version of an inversion of something about Luffy. And it's very easy to pinpoint it, with the characters that are early on. You end up running into many characters that gave up on their dreams. Buggy relegates himself to the weakest sea, and Moria is a character that sort of gave up on his dreams, and Crocodile is a character that's just kind of like trying to get his groove back. Arlong, again, character that gave up on his dreams, went into the weakest sea, and started, Big Mom is interesting because she, like Luffy, wants to unite people, but it's just the way she's doing it, and it's,
right,
extraordinarily abrasive. So, and that's, the broad version. I mean, if I individually went into each villain, you can get a little more deeper on it. And let's see here.
Kaido's a huge Luffy inverse as well.
Exactly. You couldn't be Joy Boy either. Here are two characters that, I feel and would love if we get a Kaido flashback or something. We see the moment where Kaido believed that he could be Joy Boy. Was it rocks that maybe set him on that path? There's a lot of elements in One Piece about like mixed messaging, and you take, for instance, one of the greatest flashbacks in the entire series, which is the Nolan and Kalgar flashback, and how they are worshiping a gigantic blue snake as their sun god, right? But what if that's like just a game of telephone from the ancient times, so that there's also this element where the dragon fruit model Seiryu, something that turns you into a blue dragon, a blue snake or something, could have been coveted because somewhere in the Void Century there was some element of a blue snake that was deified. It's like, how do we get to the point where Kaido believed this in the first place? By looking at what we've already been told, because there's a lot of similarities between Nola and Kashi, these snakes that were favored in that flashback, and what we eventually see Kaido being as well. Like, it seems very deliberate that Oda colored him blue. So it's like, that's sort of an element that I hope gets addressed, and it's, it would be a crazy layer of foreshadowing, and like, just prone for analysis when you kind of like just dive in there. It's just like this, yes. So, and then what sort of set him on his path, to get to the point where he is now accepted that he's not Joy Boy, but is almost on a mission to find Joy Boy and like bring him back. And I wonder if there's a thing where Kaido learned that in order to become Joy Boy, or to activate, like, you have to die. Which, if Kaido was told that, it would actually explain his introduction, where we show that he is constantly trying to unalive himself because he's trying to turn into Joy Boy. He's trying to like ascend, to find that moment. And when he believes to have killed Luffy and sees that he didn't do what was maybe prophesized or told to him, that shook his entire world up, that's when he says, you couldn't be Joy Boy either. So it's like, if we get the context of that I feel like that would really make Kaido's character like just jump and like just to crazy levels, and then you have Guernica, aka Dripper Scarfino, as I like to call him, come in and cause Luffy to actually die, and then he's reborn, and then you see this new light in Kaido. He's like, okay, this is what I've been waiting for.
Yeah, I absolutely adore Kaido, but there's definitely at the moment his character is definitely easily the character most reliant on subtext and like getting as much as you can out of the breadcrumbs. At the moment, it's the sort of thing where it's like, why does he think this? Why specifically did he give up? Those are things you can infer, and I don't particularly need. But knowing specifics about those sorts of things, if it connects to rock stuff or deepens the lore, would be really cool. And I do think that his character, if Oda wants to go that direction, is ripe for an ascent, a sort of positive, personally fulfilling trajectory that I imagine will have something to do with the admiration he felt, because I'm sure there was admiration upon seeing Gear 5 Luffy, and his dreams actualized, and as well as I would imagine King would be essential, because a big thing with him is his inability to see, his inability to be sort of loved and connect with people in the way that people like Odin or Roger or Luffy connected with people, but through his, I guess, misery and self-loathing and whatever, all of that, he blinded himself to someone who genuinely his life changed, and was, I feel like, unable to see King. So if he is going to have some sort of ascent going forward, if he's to survive and have that sort of arc, I think King's going to be essential. And yeah, filling in details about his past and why he came to think about certain things the way he did would be really cool. It would definitely elevate him further.
Wano, for me, is one of those arcs where it's something that's going to appreciate, and Oda was very deliberate, I feel, in the things that he withheld, much to the chagrin of fans weekly, by avoiding a Kaido flashback, by avoiding certain things, but there are very telling lines like "You couldn't be Joy Boy either" that I feel are ripe for Oda to later expand on, and then during a reread or anything like that, or looking back on things, it's like, okay, so Oda was foreshadowing it here, but didn't give us too much, because whatever is here is so rooted in the end game of the story that we would have been told too much. And it's like when you the advantage of hindsight, many arcs become better, like Through the Bark becomes better after reading Wano, because there's a lot of things that were set up in Wano, set up for Wano there. Fishman Island is another arc that I feel is like bogged down with so much setup that it's only going to be it's going to make sense when we get to the end. And Wano, the same way. So I'm looking forward to getting all of that exposition and that stuff that's going to really kind of color it in a new way.
Yeah, specifically Fishman Island's Charlie's prophecy and the Joy Boy's promise and all that, like that's just waiting to be fleshed out. Yeah.
So it's like whether or not it is actually Luffy that comes and destroys Fishman Island, because it's his Luffy way of sending them to the surface and forcing the world to accept them, or if it's a thing where, unbeknownst to the crew, Devon was able to touch Luffy, and then when they're going to get Shirahoshi, Blackbeard and the crew destroy Fishman Island under the guise of Luffy. There's so many different ways for it to happen, but the thing that we know is that it will happen.
Mhm. Yeah.
The Chekhov's gun is there. It's gonna the trigger's gonna be pulled. Um, so then we've got a couple of last super chats here, and then I think we'll start winding down because we're a little bit past the 2 hour mark here. And Brandon King said Loki will look like Soge King. Carrie's mask is Loki's. Like Jim Carrey's mask. Not sure I'm following the connection between Jim Carrey's mask and that, but it would be funny if like we got like a Duval thing where Loki did look like Soge King though. Lucy B said, both of you, are the Gorosei immortal demons or immortal aliens? And was AJ spoiled on anything big while he wasn't caught up? I think the Gorosei are potentially actual yokai or extensions of Emu in some way. I don't know if I'm going to go as far as to say aliens, regardless of what we see on the moon and cover stories and things, but don't think that they're humans with devil fruits that were made immortal. And then
yeah,
I don't know if you want to answer that, and then anything that you were spoiled on that was major.
Yeah, just really about the Gorosei, about the actual nature of them. I've never really, I've gone back and forth about what I think the specifics of their nature is, and I'm not really sure, to be honest. But I do love them as extensions of Emu, whether literally or sort of metaphorically, and what that means for Emu's character. That's the one sort of symbolic thing that I really love about them. And if I was spoiled, really, I don't think I was spoiled on anything super major at all. Like, my mods were super on top of it the whole way through, both in YouTube and on Twitch. I had everything muted on Twitter. I was really overly paranoid about it. And in my Discord server, people with Gear 5 profile pictures were being asked to change it so I wouldn't see it. So there was stuff like that. The biggest thing I got spoiled on, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, is that Akainu and Aokiji or Kuzan fought. That they fought each other. That's the biggest thing. And I only got spoiled on it because I thought that would happen, and someone angrily DM'd me and told me I was faking reactions, and then that was it. That was basically it. Outside of like arc names, that's about it.
It's a crazy
I was really lucky.
Specific thing to get spoiled on.
I know.
And that makes me interested to actually ask a couple of follow-ups to that, because one of my favorite twists in the series that I feel like gets automatically just spoiled for people is, did you know that Robin would join the crew?
I did not. So when she got introduced, I absolutely did not.
Like when she showed up on the Mary and said, "Let me join your crew," was that a genuine like holy shit moment for you, or did you already like know that she was a main character?
No, I wasn't expecting it at all.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool. Like these are the sorts of things where through like cultural osmosis and Twitter and stuff, I've definitely seen this stuff. I've definitely seen it throughout the years. Yeah. I'm sure I've seen Ace's death spread. I'm sure I've seen Whitebeard's death spread. I'm sure I've seen the Mary, the funeral for the Going Mary. Like, I'm sure I've seen this stuff. But it was in a period of my life where I wasn't interested in One Piece, and so I just scrolled past it, and I just never thought about it again. So by the time I started reading it, I was more cognizant of avoiding spoilers, and because of not paying attention to it in the past, I didn't remember anything. Nothing really stuck. So I was really lucky in that regard.
That's cool. One of my my other favorite reveals that I have like kind of a flashbulb memory to the weekly experience is the panel where CP9 takes their masks off. did that garner any sort of big reaction from you?
Outside of being hyped within the so I thought it was a really cool moment for the arc, and but with regards to spoilers, I had no idea. Again, I had no clue at all. So it was really hype in the moment, but didn't ring any bells. Wasn't anything I remembered. Nothing like that.
That might be one of those moments that was made better by the weekly experience, because we had a couple of weeks to kind of go through it and be like, who are these guys? What's going on?
Yeah.
And then for it to be the who it ended up being is kind of interesting. Buck's Basement supered and said, do you think Netflix views One Piece live action as their next flagship show? With so many shows like Stranger Things, Witcher, Cobra Kai ending, and Avatar The Last Airbender only being 3 seasons, does Netflix view One Piece live action as an answer for Harry Potter, Percy Jackson, Game of Thrones? I mean, I hope so. Because it only helps all of us, and me personally. But it's, you know, we'll see as we go on with that, and you know, just keep supporting it, keep watching it, you know, and as long as it keeps getting made, then maybe they'll see the you know, the value in the property, the continued value.
The remake's encouraging for that too.
Exactly. Yeah. And shout out to Hidden Island in the chat. Saw Dak Sake earlier. Let's see. And then I guess I would say, you know, an interesting thing is you avoided One Piece for so long. What changed? What made you decide, all right, now I'll do it?
So I've been making YouTube video essays as a part-time job, which turned into a full-time job since 2016. And around 2021 or so, I found myself being like, feeling a little stagnant. Like, it's not like I wanted to stop doing that, but I definitely wanted to try streaming. So I started streaming on Twitch, found that was very fun. And then I don't even know how the idea came up, but the idea of, hey, people always ask you to read the big 3. Why not just read One Piece, the first one, the first chapter on stream, just for the hell of it? I said, oh, okay. Why not? Like, it's the perfect opportunity for it. I'm streaming now. And a big issue has always been time. But if I integrate into streaming and make it a schedule, a weekly thing, that's not an issue. It's just part of the content creation. So it just worked out. Everything aligned. I streamed it. I read the first chapter. I really enjoyed it. I kept doing it. It started off as a thing where people would have to, there are channel points on Twitch, so people would have to redeem channel points for me to read a chapter, and I would kind of tease that with like, I'm not gonna read unless you redeem that. But I started enjoying it so much that I just like, okay, let's get rid of that. I'll read it every week. And then Drum Island's really important for me because when I hit Drum Island, just the stream experience of that made me fully commit to streaming the entire story. My reaction with it. So it was just like a whim that was convenient because I started streaming that snowballed into genuinely loving the story and genuinely loving the stream experience with the story.
Okay. So the quote-unquote Arlong Park moment for most people was Drum Island for you. What specific moment in it? Was it the flashback or?
Yeah, so for the story itself, I still think it was Syrup Village for me personally and my investment in the story. But the stream, like the moment where I'm like, I want to stream all of this, was Drum Island. So yeah, it was during the flashback. It was just the flashback coalescing with the conclusion and the cherry blossom imagery. The silhouetted moon, full moon shot, just all of that was really magical. With along with loving the story content, there was something, I don't know, there was something in the air that day. Chat was great, and I felt just loving the experience on a level a bit different than I had experienced so far. And it's kind of hard to express what exactly happened, but there was something magical during that stream, with the story and everyone in the enthusiasm that just got me hooked on the streaming part of it.
Well, I love that because
Which,
I love Drum
yeah.
Island, and and it's good to see some positive Drum Island talk,
Oh yeah.
especially given the conversations in the past 2 weeks.
Oh yeah. I adore Drum Island. I adore Drum Island. It's one of the most important arcs for me for a bunch of reasons.
That's great. That's great. Let's see, and then so I'm gonna start winding down here. Anybody in the chat, if you have any last questions or things that you want to bring up, now's your time. And then lastly, thank you for joining me. I think that this has been a lot of fun to spar and just kind of analyze the story, go through different beats, talk about your journey, and if we were to, I'd say, get a couple of rest chapters like we normally do at the end of an arc before we get to Elbaf, what is your most wanted place to go in the next coming chapters? What are your immediate desires for clarity, or just to see the puzzle pieces start to coalesce?
First of all, thank you as well. I totally agree. It's been a blast on my end. It's been lots of fun. So thanks for having me. And so my initial just hard overhead, not thinking about anything idea would be, if Oda wants to go further with Kaido and Big Mom, or Big Mom, a crumb of that. Just nothing super extensive, but a crumb would be really cool.
Is it you want Kaido to be alive?
He doesn't need to be. Out of the two situations, because of the potential of his character, if he is alive, I would prefer him to be alive. But if Oda wants to have either of them alive, I would like to check in with them in the next little bit, or a little hint, or a little bit of foreshadowing, or something. I think it's a decent time for it, and it's just personally my gut impulse is to want that. But if they're both dead, and they don't go anywhere, then that's fine too. Also, something to do on a similar sort of train of thought, something to do with Garp, and the fallout of all that happened during that amazing stretch. And because of all that we've talked about with regards to how this just feels so lined up for Vivi to play a part in the relatively short-term future, I want a decent amount of Vivi, and by extension, Morgan's as well. Like those are the characters I think of the most in the moment.
Well, I think that's great. I love the idea of getting more context on Kaido and Big Mom. I don't want Kaido to be alive, but I do want Big Mom to be alive. I think that there's some rich potential for her to play a role in Elbaf, given that her backstory and things with her are so tied there. I think that we're not done with the Charlotte family, obviously, because Pudding is with Blackbeard. I was a little disappointed by Katakuri during the speech where we saw that he was still on Whole Cake Island. I was hoping that he would have manned an operation to get his sister back, and then inserted himself into the main story. But it seems like Oda doesn't want to clog the Katakuri into everything. So I don't know how that, that's gonna get addressed with Pudding. But if Big Mom managed to pull up to Elbaf, theoretically, there's a moment at the end of Wano where we get confirmation that the Big Mom pirates left. I don't know if they would have left without Big Mom, and in which case Smoothie was there and she probably could have wrung the lava out. And then she could have been recovering this entire time. One thing that I feel is still unaddressed is the idea that Big Mom's memories, she doesn't remember things, but she has a daughter that can manipulate memories. So context on whether that already happened, or giving Big Mom her memories back, or pulling them to the surface. If they're in the inside out, bottom area, and turns, eating Mother Carmel and those other kids into a core memory, then, we could see some sort of a shift in her character. And I think that's Pudding's power is very interesting. One of my favorite fruits, and entirely underutilized.
Definitely. Yeah, I think in terms of both of them, the Kaido thing is more so just seeing the potential directions his arc could go in, given things that have been set up, and a sort of trajectory his character can go in. But I think in terms of what's been, in a more concrete way, set up for the story, given where it's going, Big Mom has more concrete fleshing out that could be that could occur. And I totally agree about Pudding's power. And I totally agree about Katakuri. I love Katakuri, but and I'm sure he'll have more prominence going on down the line, but I don't know exactly. He seems like one of the more tricky characters to integrate. So I hope it's done well, but it's definitely a dicey one, I think.
One thing that I want to potentially happen with Pudding's fruit is, we've been teased the idea that if she awakens her third eye, she'll be able to read the poneglyphs. But I'm also curious if her fruit, if it was awakened, could then pull the memories from objects. So if she, in the same way that she would jam her hand into someone's head and pull the memories out, if she could jam her hand into a poneglyph and pull the memories out, then I think visually that would be really interesting and could very organically put us in the past.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of theories over the years that Pudding would be used to give us like context on the Rocks flashback, or what happened at God Valley, and things like that, by either Big Mom, Kaido, or Garp or something. And I don't know. I'd rather her stick her hand into a poneglyph.
I hadn't heard that one, but yeah, I hadn't heard that one, but no, I love that too. And like you say, that is really organic too.
Yeah. So just checking in on the chat here. Not seeing too many big questions here. Is there any videos of yours or anything that anyone in stream, that you think anybody in stream would be interested in, that you'd like to direct them to? AJ's channel and Twitter is linked below.
I do have the thing we were referring to earlier, which is like a sort of podcast format of review of every arc in the series up till the end of Wano, which are easy listens and generally fun, and I think it's cool to follow the journey.
Co-signed.
Um, thank you. But for a more formal video essay, like I mentioned, the more I guess buttoned up, polished sort of thing that I've been doing longer. I did a video on Kaido a few months back where I really try to put the breadcrumbs of his character together to sort of explain why I think he's one of the most important characters, I think, in the story thematically, and why I love his role in Wano in a way that, even for people who disagree, I think could be interesting. Those are probably the two. Well, they're the two One Piece things on my channel, so those are probably the things to go to.
That's great. That's great. So yeah, check out AJ's stuff. Check out his Kaido video, and like, comment, subscribe if you're feeling the vibe over here. And any last things that you want to talk about before we go, or anything that you want to say to the chat? Otherwise,
No, just that. Thank you so much for having me on. It was a really, it was a long time coming. I remember when I followed you, you immediately DM'd me and told me to mute you because of spoilers.
yeah, I didn't want to spoil you.
Yeah, yeah, and which I really appreciated, and that we'd have some sort of discussion down the line. This is a while back, so I'm glad we were finally able to do it, and I had a lot of fun. Thank you for having me on. Thanks for everyone for watching, and yeah, it was a great way to spend a Sunday afternoon. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, and I'm happy to have you here. I'm glad that this worked out and we were able to get together and make this happen after talking about it. I mean, geez, that must have been like a year ago or something.
Yeah.
But everybody in chat, make sure you thank AJ, and that's gonna be it. Take care, everybody, and thanks for joining us today.
I've been swimming deep, deep. Savage.
Okay. We cut off?